Oh, hello and good morning. So it's Monday morning. It's 30 degrees out. So a nice chilly March morning. Monday, March 23rd. So here we are in the morning, and it's, I don't know, about 20 after 7. Last night, I had the Seestar out all night long. Had it programmed to capture some objects overnight. So now it's time to bring it in and get the data off of it and see if I actually got anything. So that'll be the drill for today. Get this data off the Seestar and see what we got. Be back. Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Double G Studios here on a Monday morning. So after leaving my Seestar S50 telescope out overnight, I had it programmed to capture 3 or 4 different objects during the night while I was sleeping. So I brought it in, taking it off of the tripod, as you can see here. The Seestar S50 smart telescope does not come with a memory card. The memory on this is built in, so when it's time to download the photos off of this puppy, you either have to do it wirelessly or you got to bring it over to the computer and plug it in, which is what I'm going to do right now. I could do it wirelessly, but that's painfully slow, so I prefer to do it by plugging it into the computer and getting the data that way. So as I said, so last night I programmed my Seestar to observe some objects after the moon set. So the moon was out last night, but it was about a quarter moon, not a lot of light, but still it was out, but it set at about midnight. So from midnight on through the rest of the night, there was no moon in the sky, and we were predicted not to have any clouds, so I opted for programming my Seestar to capture some objects during the night. Now it's time to see what it got. The one thing I did want to show or demonstrate is that, of course, these smart telescopes are designed for amateur users or people who don't know how to do astrophotography. So, which would be me. So they are designed to stack your observations for you automatically. They do live stacking while you're taking the observation, and they will show you a final picture, which is usually a pretty good picture. Not great, but usually pretty good. So a lot of people will just take those pictures off their smart telescope that it made for them and figure, well, that's as good a picture as I'm going to get, and I'll just keep that, and that'll be fine. What I have learned over the last couple of years, starting with my Dwarf Lab 2 smart telescope, is that if you download the data yourself and if you process it yourself, you can create a better picture than what the smart telescope creates for you. It takes a little work, but you can really improve dramatically on the data that these telescopes make for you and the pictures that they make for you. So I'm going to give a demonstration of exactly how I do that. Not that it's the right way to do it, it's just the way that I do it. So anyway, the very first thing we're going to have to do is get all this data off the telescope and onto my hard drive. Okay, so the files have now been copied. Now I will close the Seestar. I'll go back to the Seestar and delete those files after I have processed these, just to make sure that I really did get everything. I'll leave those on the Seestar for now, but I will go back and delete them after I've got these all processed. But now that I got them on my E drive, we can now proceed. So on to the next step. Be right back. So yeah, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to the data for our M1 object that we collected, which is, 205 fit files, or 205 individual photographs that were taken of the object M1 last night. So the first thing I want to do is I want to cull this data. What that means is I literally want to look at every single photo and get rid of any frames where a satellite streaks through, or maybe some thin clouds went by and obscured the stars a little bit. That does happen. There's a lot of different reasons why you may need to cull your data. In the case of my limited sky backyard that I have available to me, sometimes at the end of an observation, a tree will start to creep into the pictures that you're taking, and so all of those frames with anything other than star data in it, they have to be eliminated from the stack. You got to delete them. You got to get them out of there. You do not want to process those. So I'm going to go through a process known as culling. I'm going to cull the data. There's a lot of different ways to do this, and I'm not saying this is the best way or the only way. There's probably several different ways to do it. The way I currently do it is I'm using a piece of software called astap, which is stacking software, but I'm not going to use it for stacking. I'm going to use it to cull my data. Then I'll use a different piece of software to actually process the stack. But as you can see, when this opens up, it's really bare bones software. There's a button right here that has this Greek letter on it. If you just click that button, you will open up a window. Let me clear the list. You're going to open up a window that you can use to help cull your data. And the way it works is, now this is high-level astrophotography software, most of which I have no idea how it works or what it does. I'm only familiar with the very few things that I use it for. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff this thing will do and handle. It'll handle your darks and your flats and flat darks, and it'll inspect your mount, and it'll do all kinds of crap. I just want to use it to cull my data, so I'm going to concentrate just on lights. As I'm new to astrophotography, so I'm not doing calibration frames. I don't do darks, don't do flats, don't do flat darks, not doing any calibration frames at all. I'm working with my light frames only. So anyway, so the way this would work is you're going to go look for your light folder, which is in this new folder I just created, and it's M1, and I want the lights. And I will select all of the lights in the folder, which will bring them to this list here that you see. The next thing we will do is we will click the Analyze and Organize Images button. And this will do pretty much exactly what it says. It's going to look at every single image digitally and assign it a quality rating. It'll count the stars that are on the image. It'll look for how good the background is. There's a lot of other stuff it's going to look for in there. But it's going to create a rating for each of your light frames and let you know which ones right out of the box are bad frames you can delete right away. And then it'll also go through a process where it will look for satellite streaks. But the first run through on all the files, and we have, 205 files total. That's this number right here, 205 total. Out of that 205, 194 have been deemed to be acceptable. It's already found some bad ones. And you can tell that by the little down thumb sign that you see for this particular file, and notice that file is already unticked. So the software has found a frame that it deemed to be bad. We can look at it. Let me move this a little off screen here. If we look at this one, and of course now the views you get here are going to be the histogram views only, so you're looking at black and white representation of the image in a histogram view. And sometimes it's really hard to tell why in particular this particular frame was rejected, but there's a pretty good chance that the background had something wrong with it that it didn't like compared to all the other backgrounds. So it's already flagged that one for not processing. we can find all of those all at once by scrolling up to the top here. And if I click on the quality column, we can gather all those together in one group, highlight all of them. And then if we press the combination Control-Delete on the keyboard, that will change the file name in the folder. It'll remove the FITS extender and replace it with BAK. So that when you go to process a stack with your stacking software, any file that's not an FITS file will be ignored. So those files will not be processed. They've been renamed. So I'm left with 194 good frames. Next thing I'll do is I'll click this box to reorder the frames in their proper order, the order in which they were taken. And then next I'm going to click the streaks button. And that's going to look at each image and see if it can detect any satellite streaks. This particular feature of this software, you can adjust it for how accurate it is at finding frames with streaks. And out of the box, without changing the default settings, I'm going to say it's, in my experience, it's running about 50% accurate. In other words, it'll find about 50% of the frames that have streaks in them, but it will not find some. There's a lot that it won't find, and the only way you're going to find them is you have to literally look at every frame to find the ones that the automatic process doesn't find. But the automatic process will find quite a few of them. And in addition to the streaks, it will also find that what I've learned or noticed in my experience is the streaks process will also find frames that have stars that are blurred, because it does see those as streaks. And those are also good frames to get out of your stack. So again, we click the quality button and look at all these bad files it found. Let's highlight all of those and do the Control-Delete. Get rid of those, and now we're down to 170 good frames. I'm going to double click the streaks column just to make sure I didn't miss any frames of streaks. It looks like I did not. Alright, so now that I've done the analyze and organize, and I've done the streaks, the last thing to do is to, again, click here to reorder the files in their correct order. And now I'm going to do what they refer to as blinking, which basically means I'm going to go through every frame quickly and just visually look at it and determine whether or not there's any streaks that the software missed. So let's do that right now. I'm going to move this window out of the way so you can see what's going on here. And this is the first folder. And what you do to blink with this software is you hold down the control key and you operate the up and down arrow keys. So starting on file 1, here we go. Just looking for any streaks. Yep, there's one. Did you see it? There it is, right there. So the streaking software missed that one. So holding the control key down, tap and delete, and get rid of that file. As we can see there, it's gone. And we'll keep going. Got almost 200 of them to go through here, but we'll get through them fairly quickly. The blink process is very effective. The human eye is apparently more effective than software at finding satellite streaks. Oop, there's another one. So the software missed that one. Get rid of that one. Right. And that's it. We have now gone through the entire stack. So, bring this back over here. Okay, so I've now gone through my stack of lights that was originally 205 frames. We have now culled that down to 168. So now I have 168 good frames left to stack with. So at this point I could go ahead and run the stacking software and process that data. But there is one more step I'm going to do before I do that. And this is something new that I've added to my workflow or work process. So in Excel I have created a database to store all of this data that ASTAP gives me. So ASTAP gives me a lot of data. It gives me what filter was used, Gives me a quality rating, background ratings, how many stars, what exposure was used, what the temperature was in the case of the Seestar. The Seestar will tell you what the temperature was when the picture was taken. That's an internal temperature to the telescope, so it's usually warmer than the air outside. But as we can see here, it's reporting a temperature of 25, which I believe is in Celsius, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure that's in Celsius. So you'd have to convert that to Fahrenheit. But anyway, it gives you some picture dimensions, date times listed. There's a lot of other data here too, if you scroll over and see it, including which telescope was used. But all of that is the kind of data that's perfectly is a ripe candidate for databasing, if you will. So I have created a database to store all of my astrophotography data in. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to go to Excel, and the database I created is called All Light Frame Database. This is a macro-enabled file. I wrote the macros that make this thing work. There it is, All Light Frame Database, version 1.00. Click to proceed. And here's my database. It opens up on the main database tab. And here we see the main database. There's some data that's displayed right across the top, right on the box. So just looking right across the top, we can see that we've got 32,332 frames stored. That comprises 119 different objects that have been observed. I've used 5 different filters over the course of all those observations. I've completed 250 total observations, and those 250 total observations have so far entailed 116 hours, 15 minutes, and 12 seconds worth of observations. Data I can see immediately just looking at the database. Very large database. Thing is huge, like 32,000 so far. But anyway, there's every observation I've made going back to 2024. So now I'm going to add the new data. I'm going to do that on the Imports Records tab. So let's go to ASTAP. To get the data out of ASTAP, all I got to do is Control A to highlight it all, and then Control C to copy it. And then we'll come over to Excel, and on my Import Records tab, I will paste it in cell A1. And after it's been pasted, I will do the key combination Control-Shift-T, which will activate the macro to place this data into the database. And we'll do that. The ASTAP data has been added to the database, and it takes me to the Report tab where I can double check and make sure the data got inserted in the database correctly. And the Report tab does tell me that 168 frames were added, and if I look at ASTAP, right, 168, that's correct. Yeah, 168 frames. It was not a new object I added. It's an object I've observed before. If it had been a new object, that would have shown up in that number right there. So the Total Reports tab is my way of doing a double check to confirm that the data on the Import Records tab that I put there did get inserted over into the Lights tab. And I can easily verify that by going over to the Date column and finding the date. Oops, 3/22. It's the one I just added. And I can even find the actual individual observation that was added on that date. So several ways I can double check it. Once I've filtered my database, I've created a macro to unfilter it. So I will do there. But anyway, so there's the database that records all of my observations. This comes in handy when I want to create slideshows to show my pictures. The data that I put on my slideshows I will extract from this database using a different tab here that I use to look up individual observations and extract data from them. So this is a work in progress, this database. I'm still working on a way to automatically import lat long data from the FITS header. Still working on that. That's something the Seestar provides. My Dwarf Lab does not provide that. I don't get lat long information off the Dwarf Lab. I do from the Seestar, though, so I'm working on a way to automatically import that into my database. I haven't finished that work yet. Anyway, database is a work in progress, but that's the deal. I would go through on every single one of my observations and do the culling process, and then highlight the remaining frames that are good and insert them into this database. So once I've done that, I'm done with the database. I can close it. And I'm done with ASTAP at this point, so I can close that also. And at this point, I am ready to process this data finally. So let me take a short break here, and then we'll get directly into the data processing. So I'm ready to begin processing my lights, but before I do that, I do want to give a couple of shout outs to some YouTube channels that have been very helpful to me. First of which is SETI Astro is one. This guy creates a lot of scripts and tools that are very useful in astrophotography. Does a good job explaining how to use them. And another one is Naz over at Naz Astronomy. Is his channel. This guy has written a script I used all the time in my processing, which I will show you later. He's been very helpful. And then finally, another shout out I want to give to Rich over at Deep Space Astro. Rich's Cyril tutorials are excellent. Everything I've learned to do in Cyril, I've pretty much learned by watching mostly Rich's videos here on his channel, Deep Space Astro. All three of those channels are just excellent resources for someone who wants to get into this hobby and learn how to use their telescopes better and how to process their images. So I did want to give a shout out to those three channels that have been very, very helpful in my journey through astrophotography. So anyway, having given them their appropriate shout outs, I will now proceed by using Cyril to process this stack of light images to see if I can make a better image than the telescope default image, which again is this image right here. So let me get out of the way, and we're going to activate Cyril. Cyril is a piece of software that uses Python scripts to get all its work done. You don't really have to know how to be a Python programmer, just you have to know how to use Cyril to select scripts to do your processing. So Cyril has activated and it's ready to go. And first thing I always do is look right here and verify my working directory. And let me talk about that a minute, because I did forget about that. So my working directory is on my F drive. Now, why am I using my F drive? I could go straight to my E drive and process these files directly on my E drive. However, what I like to do is when I'm going to do my processing, I like to let me come back up here. I like to take my light folder and copy it over to the F drive and do the processing over there. The reason I do that, a couple of reasons actually, but the main reason I do that is my F drive is a faster drive than my E drive. My E drive is a hard disk drive, utilizing the tried and true hard disk technology. My F drive is an SSD drive, modern drive, all solid state, no moving parts. It is a much faster drive than my F drive, than my E drive. I'm sorry, than my E drive. So my F drive I use to do all my astro processing on. When the processing is all done, I will copy the output back over to the E drive to store it over there. But for the processing, I will do it in the F drive. The other reason I do that too is if I screw something up here, if I somehow mess up my light files in some way, don't see how that's possible, but with computers anything can happen. If somehow I mess up my light files, I still got my original back over here on the E drive that are untouched. So my process is I take my lights, copy them over to my F drive, and then my F drive is what Cyril is set up to look for a working directory. Cyril will access the Cyril temp directory on the F drive and look for a light folder. If it finds a lights folder, it will process those files. So I am ready, finally, to process those files for the observation of M1 that I did last night. So the first thing I will do is activate this script that Rich over at Deep Space Astro wrote and posted recently for everybody to use. Rich, this script is genius. I love this script. It's called Script Launcher. All it really is just a simple Python script that allows you to put all of your favorite Python scripts for astro processing into one list and access them all one after the other, hitting them with a check mark to show that you have completed them as you've done them. And this allows you to arrange this list in whatever order best suits your personal workflow. Right now I have this list set up to best to be for my workflow, or the way I like to do things, which is a little bit different than the way some of the other folks likes to do things. But it's one of the neat things about astrophotography is it's kind of personal in some ways. But anyway, so what you see here is a list of Python scripts that I'm going to use to process the telescope data into a really nice looking image. The first script I'm going to run is the script that Naz over at Naz Astronomy wrote and posted. Now Naz created a script that is specifically for smart telescopes. Thank you, Naz. Let me activate that. And so the Naz Astronomy Smart Telescope pre-processing is going to do pretty much just what it says. It's going to take all of my FITS data from this observation and it's going to pre-process those into a stack. Then once it gets them in the stack, it'll do other processing to that stack to eventually place them in an order to where the final process will literally compress not compress, but process that stack down into one final image, utilizing several different steps along the way. And what Naz has done is he has created a script to simplify all that for those of us who are not as astute at using all the individual processes that are available within Cyril. So right away, his script has already recognized that the data I have in my lights folder is from a Ziwo Seestar S50. So his script already recognizes that. Then there are various settings I can apply to the processing of the stack of data, which I really have already done previously and created a presets file, which is in the working directory. So I will load the presets for my Ziwo Seestar S50. And right here we can see that there are 168 FITS files in the lights directory that are going to be processed. I'm going to be using the drizzle method to help process the stack with these appropriate settings. I'm going to utilize stack weighting based on the weighted FWHM rating for each file. Now FWHM, I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it's basically a rating that's assigned to each file based on several different factors, including quality ratings and other things that will result in a FWHM number that can be used to arrange your stack from the worst to the best. And that's what I will do with this setting here, is I will set it up to do weighted FWHM processing on the stack. The final option that I do have checked in presets is, am I going to use filters? Now, I don't use filters all the time. It depends on the size of the stack I'm processing. In this case, I'm processing more than 150. Generally, if it's under 150, I will not deploy any filters. If we're over 150, I will deploy filters. So in this case, I'll leave the filters checked. The filters are simply going to apply some additional factors to evaluate the stack and kick out some additional bad frames based on these percentages. 98% roundness, 98% background, 98% FWHM, and 98% star count. Applying these filters could toss out a few more of the worst frames in the stack, so that by the time all is said and done, you're hopefully processing the absolute best FITS files that you have in your stack and ignoring ones that are not as good. Anyway, that's probably not a real good explanation of what's going on here, but best I can do. But anyway, in this case, with 168 files, I'm going to leave filters checked, and I will just click Run, and the script will now go through the long process of going through that stack of FITS files that I've pointed it at, and analyzing each one. And it's going to do plate solving, which plate solving is, think of that as like GPS for space. It'll look at each file and determine exactly where that file fits in a star chart, I guess, for lack of a better way to explain it. But it will plate solve each image so that the final stack can use the plate solving information in order to make sure that each image is aligned correctly. Remembering that these images are taking over a span of time, so that each image is not exactly like the image that was taken before it. What stacking software does is it finds stars in the image that it can match and align from image to image to image to make sure that entire stack of images is all aligned on certain stars that are in the image, and plate solving is used to help get that done. There's also a registration process that it goes through here with each of the images. Registration is similar to the plate solving. It just helps to get each image in the stack to align with your selected object, or the object you were targeting, hopefully being at the center at all times. Anyway, it's going to take a while for that to happen. With 168 FITS files from the Seestar, that's going to, on average, that'll probably take about 15 or 20 minutes to get that all processed on my slow computer. So I'll come back after this part of the processing has been completed. Okay, so the Nastronomy pre-processing script has completed its processing. And here's the result, which you see here. It's a nice black screen, kind of in the shape of an image you'd get out of a phone, typically. So anyway, that step is complete. Next step, orient, crop, and plate solve. So I'm going to orient this in landscape mode by tipping it over like that. And then I'm going to crop it and plate solve it. Now to do that, right now we're looking at the output of the final stack. This is the final image, but we're looking at it in linear view, and you can change your views down here. And right now we're looking at it in the linear view. Now, I don't know the technical aspects of all this, so I can only go by what I think I know. But basically, linear view is pretty much just a view of all the data linearly that the sensor in the telescope has captured. And it's just showing it to you linearly, which really doesn't show you much. In order to be able to see an image, you really have to take the linear data, then you have to stretch it, or do a process called stretching, in order to bring out the actual image. But linear view is the state of the data that you really want to do some of your processing in. So to help out with that, since you're not really seeing much, what you can do, even though the data is in its linear state, is you can look at it with various different views, including an auto stretch. The auto stretch will apply a stretching algorithm to this image to give you an idea of what it'll look like if you do your own stretching to bring out the image. But it is just a perception of what the image will look like if you stretch it. It doesn't touch the actual data. But here's the auto stretch view of our image. You can see M1 there, similar to the picture we got out of the final stack of the telescope. But notice also how we see how this looks funny, how these frames are stacked on top of each other, and notice how they didn't all line up, and that is absolutely correct. That is how a smart telescope does its tracking, because smart telescopes, although they can utilize an equatorial mount, they are designed in order to be automatic to use alt-azimuth alignment, which does not use an equatorial mount to do its tracking. So that form of alignment can track an object pretty accurately across the sky, but not quite as accurately as an equatorial mount. And also, this type of tracking doesn't account for the rotation of the universe and the rotation of the Earth, so it'll stay centered on an object, but as the Earth and the universe rotates, you get this effect starts to happen over time, and that's reflected by how the stack was built and how it came out. Of course, I'm only really interested in the best data out of the stack, and that's easy to see here on this view, but it's even easier to see on a histogram view. So I like to use the histogram view to get started with this processing. So with the histogram view, I will first go to my selection, and I want to always select in a 16:9 frame format. That's just a personal preference of mine. I like my astrophotography pictures to be the same ratio as my computer screens or a television screen. That way, if I do go to create slideshow in the future, I don't have to do any cropping or any resizing to get a picture to fill a screen. It'll already do so up front. So I use 16:9 as my default selection method, and now I will define a frame here. Let me draw out, and we'll just now what I'm trying to do here is capture as little noise as possible, and you can see that's why I like the histogram view. With the histogram view, really shows you the noise that you get out of the stack processing. You can see the noise going all the way around the edge. So I'll try not to gather any of that noise into this frame that I'm defining here. It looks pretty good to me. Maybe I do like to kind of get the object a little bit centered, so maybe that's not too bad right there. When you're happy, right click and crop it. So I've oriented it, I've cropped it, I now need to plate solve it. Now, the stacking software that, particularly the pre-processing one that Naz wrote, it already does plate solving while it processes the stack. However, when you reorient and crop an image, it's always a good idea to plate solve it again. So I'm going to do that now. And you do that by going to Tools, Astrometry, Image Plate Solver, and just click the OK button, and then that process is done. Alright, I've oriented, cropped, and plate solved. I've done that step. I do need to do one more step here, though, that, oh, no I don't. My next step is the Auto BGE. This is the background extraction. So let me activate that and explain that. So background extraction is a process you can do on images, particularly ones that are taken in light polluted areas, like mine, like my backyard. Last time I checked on a Bortle map, I think my backyard is rated at Bortle 6.9. So it's pretty well polluted. So what that means is when you take a stack of images, you're going to have some variations in light across the image. The background extraction, what that'll do is that'll analyze the image and spread that all out across the whole image so that you don't have a geez, I don't know how to explain this properly, but it's a way of helping to compensate for the fact that you are taking pictures in a light polluted area. Background extraction will help to remove noise across the image caused by extraneous light sources other than starlight. I don't know if that's a proper explanation, but anyway, it's a good thing to do on images like the ones that I have. So let me just click the process button. This will be fairly quick. The process is complete. I'll show you the before and after so you can see what happened. Let me close that. One of the neat things in Serial is you can usually do a before and after most processes that you do to see if you like the results. Again, we're just looking at this in the histogram view, but if I look at the before, and you see there's more green maybe on one side of the image than the other. It seems like there's more lighting over here than there is over on this side. If we look at the after, you can kind of see how that's been more evenly spread all across the image. That's what background extraction does. So it makes the background of the image look much more flat than it would otherwise. Having completed that, I will check that off. My next step is color calibration. And I do that over here. And you go to color calibration, and you go to spectrophotometric color calibration. And on this screen, what I need to do is select my sensor, and Sony IMX678 is the sensor of my dwarf lab. So the last time I used this software, I was processing dwarf lab images. I will change that to the Seestar S50. And in this case, my Seestar S50, which the Seestar currently will automatically either use no filter or an LP filter when it takes images. And if you use it in the automatic mode, it'll decide which filter to use. And it'll report to you which filter that it used. So I do need to look at the original lights folder, because the file names will tell me. Yes, right there, LP. LP is the filter that was used on this particular observation by the Seestar. So once I've confirmed that, I can come over here and select the LP filter for the Seestar S50. If the LP filter had not been used, I would have selected no filter on this screen, right there. But since the LP filters was used, I will select that. And then just select OK. And then Serial will draw me a couple of white balance maps that I have no idea what they're telling me. So I just close them and close this, and we are done with the color calibration. That is done. And I can now go to a auto stretch view. Remember, the original linear data, the linear data of this image has not been touched yet. This is just a representation of what the image will look like once I apply stretching. But now that I'm looking at an auto stretch view of the linear data, I will go to the next step on the list, which is the aberration remover. Another awesome script that somebody wrote and contributed to the Serial project. We can give this guy a shout out too, as I used this software on almost every image I process. So this Ricardo Albergue. Ricardo Albergue. Salute to you, sir. This is an awesome script. What does the script do? Well, I will show you. Let me just hit the calculate button, and while it's running its process, so basically, smart telescopes can track an object across the sky, but they don't track them quite as well as super expensive rigs can. And when you do an observation over time, the stars on your smart telescope images will begin to elongate, for lack of a better word. Mostly due to the field rotation effect that happens as you take these pictures over time and things rotate. Anyway, you will get the stars to kind of elongate a little bit, especially if you do observations over a long period of time. So what Ricardo has done is written a script to correct for that. Now in the Seestar images, they don't do too bad. I find this script to be actually more useful on my dwarf lab images. But nonetheless, it will make a lot of the stars a lot more rounder or more round as they should be than they are now. So let's run this script. We did. It's complete. Let me show you before and after on that. So looking at the before and the after. It's a subtle difference, but you can see it, especially if I zoom in a little bit. So and you look at this star here as an example right here. So there's the after. So before aberration removal, after. You see the star is more round as it should be. So his aberration remover does help correct for the alignment problems that you have with smart telescopes. Nice script. It has made all of my images look better. I definitely owe that guy some coffee or something. Damn. Got to get around to that. Anywho, that process is done. Tick that one off. Let me go back to the full screen view. Now, the next step is somewhat controversial in the astrophotography community, I guess. I don't know if it is or not, but one of the things that I have noticed in watching a lot of the tutorial videos I've been watching is this is a point in the process where most of the folks that I've been watching, like Rich and Naz, this is the point where they will do noise removal. And that's why I have this noise removal script sitting here at this point in the process. I don't know if it's my smart telescopes, if it's my lighting conditions, I don't know what it is, but for my process, I don't like using noise removal at this point in time. Now, they always recommend you do noise removal on the linear data. I don't know. My experience in processing my images, I find noise removal more useful to do at the end of the process than at this point. So I'm going to do this my way, and I'm skipping that step. Not going to do that one. So what I am going to go to now is the one of the main steps in this process. I'm going to do the star removal using the Cyclone Starless script. So let's activate that. Some more coffee. All right. So Starless is ready to go. I will just click Process Image, and it will do its thing. This will take a few minutes. Takes a long time on a dwarf lab image. Dwarf lab images are twice the size of these Seestar images, by the way. So processing dwarf lab images takes more than twice as long for that reason. But I digress. So this will take a few minutes. I'll come back when it's done. Okay, and the process has completed. And what Starless does is it does what the name says. It literally takes every star out of the image and leaves behind anything that's not a star. So here's the result. And let me show you in the directory here. So in the working directory, what the Starless program has done is created two files. It has created a Starless file and has created a star mask file. Right now it's showing us the Starless file it created, and that's what we're going to work on now. I'll come back and work on the star mask file after I'm done with that and talk about that. But first let's stay on the Starless file that it created. And the file it created is listed right here. It shows you the file name. This is the current file that is now being displayed to be worked on. Again, we are looking at it in an auto stretch view. The data is still in its linear condition. But now is the time when we are going to stretch it. So the first thing I'll do is change this to a linear view. And then to make sure I have a proper linear view, I'm going to activate. Now, this is the old way I used to do stretching, would be to go to the generalized hyperbolic stretch transformation screen and begin doing the stretching process. This is a process that it's not terribly difficult, but it can take some time. On an image like this, it might take a good 15-20 minutes to go through various different stretching exercises in order to get your image to really pop out. This is the way I used to do it, and I struggled with it. This is the part of astrophotography that I always struggled with, was the stretching. It just never did seem like I could get a really good, proper stretch, at least as good as what I've seen other guys on tutorials do. So it's something I've always been a little bit frustrated with. Fortunately, I do not any longer have to deal with this. I did want to show it. And then also, there's a little bug in Cyril that sometimes on a linear view, you're not getting the true linear view, and one of the ways to quash that bug is to activate this screen and then close it. Notice our linear view now is totally black, which is what you would normally expect from a linear view of your data. So starting from the black linear view of our data, we are now going to do stretching, but instead of me manually stretching it with the tool I just displayed, I'm going to go to another script that somebody has written for Cyril. Someone else I need to give a shout out to. We're done with Starless. I can tick that off. I'm ready now to go to the Verilux Hypermetric Stretch script. And again, salute to who wrote this one. Dang. Oh, sorry, I don't know who made this one. Let's see. Can I buy the guy a cup of coffee here? Support the developer, buy me a coffee. Who was it? Ricardo Peternini. That's another guy I owe a cup of coffee to. I'll get around to it, Ricardo. I'm a retired guy. I don't have a lot of money, but I'll get there. Anyway, at the very least I can do is give the guy a shout out. He wrote this script, along with several other scripts, actually. If we look over here at my script list, I've got a few of them on here, which I will show. But anyway, this one he wrote is the script that has relieved me of having to deal with stretching the data myself, because Ricardo has automated that for me. So what I'll first do is click the live preview button. This is a preview of what the stretch should look like when it's done. Then you click the AutoCalc Log ID button. And the default on this is normally .2. For the data that I process, I found a .17 to be more suitable. So that's the one change I've made from the default. But other than that, that's the only thing I've changed to the defaults. Now, the other thing I need to do is verify the sensor. It's still set up for my Dwarf Lab telescope, so I'll change it to the Seestar S50. And let me hit the AutoCalc ID again since I changed that setting. Once you've clicked the AutoCalc Log ID and you're satisfied with your preview, just come down and click the Process button and then close the screen. And we are done with that tool. And there's our stretched image without any stars, of course, which is nice. It looks very good. Let's make it look better. Next step, Verilux curves. Another one of Ricardo's awesome scripts. Let me zoom in on this one a little bit. All right. So let me apply curves. I'm not going to go through all the time it would take to explain everything I'm going to do here, other than just to give a cursory explanation from the best as I understand it. But anywho, my way of using this tool is something I've come across through trial and error, pretty much. But one of the very first things I'll do is set a dot right here in the very center, and then I'll come down here below the dot to about this point and just drag this down, and you see that that'll darken the area around my object, which is nice. It just makes it pop out more. We will apply that. Now, next step, for the RGB, for all the RGB data in here, we're going to stretch that some more. And what I like to do is to activate the enable range limiting and to show the mask. What that allows me to do now is to drag my minimum up until the only thing left showing any light is just my subject of interest, pretty much. Not much background. Then we'll come over at the high end and bring that in. And what that's going to do is allow me to mask off some of the brighter areas areas of the image that are already bright that I don't need to brighten anymore. And how much of this you do is kind of an artistic call at this point. This is the point where astrophotography starts to become a little more artistic. It's kind of based up to your personal preferences where you set some of this stuff. But I want to darken a little bit of the lightest areas of that, something like that. Now I'm going to turn the mask off so I can see what happens when I apply the stretch. So now when I apply the stretch, it should only be happening in between those two settings, and all the other data should remain untouched. So let's do that. And you see, ooh, that brightens it quite a bit. Let's bring that down a hair. I didn't want to make it that bright, but I did want to lighten it a bit. About there. I like that. Let me apply that. Now I'm going to do one more stretch in the RGB level, and now I'm going to try to bring to light the more dimmer areas around the outside of this object. And the way I will do that is, again, using the same masking method. Bring this in, maybe about there. Now I want to bring the high end way down, like that. Yeah. And now let's feather out the dark a little bit, like that. Right. Let's unmask it and do this stretch and see what happens. There we go. So it brought in a little bit more of that, the fainter outer areas. I'm going to apply that. And I'm going to be happy with that. Now I'm also going to do a what is this? Chroma stretch. Basically, this is going to be a way of enhancing the colors. Again, I'm going to try to mask it out to where it's only going to affect my object of interest mostly. And I think I want to, there we go. I don't want to darken very much of it, just a tiny bit, like that. Okay, and then let's bring that up. Oh yeah, it makes the colors pop out a little bit better. I'm going to set that about there and apply that. And the last thing I like to do is just give the whole thing a global boost in saturation. Just a little bit. And apply that. And now let's process all those changes we made with the curve tool. And there we go. I am done with curves. Let's move on to Verilex's Revela tool. Now this will be a way of further trying to enhance structure and contrast. So this will take a little bit of playing around with. One of the very first things I like to do is take it to the extreme just to see what it does. Ew, that's way too bright, but you can see a lot of detail being highlighted there though. So let's go about halfway. Still a bit blown out bright right here, too much for my taste. Let me bring that back a little bit. That's a little bit better. Now with this tool you can press spacebar to toggle between what the original looks like and what your enhanced image looks like. So you can see. And that structure, let me add some micro contrast to this. Dial that back just a hair. I kind of like that. So once you like your results, click the process button. Okay, that's the Revela tool. Next I will go with a tool called HDR Multiscale. Another tool that I'm not sure who wrote this. Oh, written by Franklin Merrick. Salute to you, Franklin Merrick. I like this script. Let me fit this to the preview. Now, this doesn't work on all objects, but on this particular object it'll probably be pretty effective. The default settings are probably not going to work on this, mostly because the object's kind of small. This tool works better on some of your larger nebulas. But nonetheless, let's just see what the default looks like if I take the default settings. Yeah, it blows it out way too much. So without explaining what I'm doing, I'll just go to to what I've learned through experience with an object like this, it's probably good to dial me down to about a 3 here, and to move my max gamma over a little bit. Now let's see what that looks like. Oh yeah, that's much better. Now look at the difference though. Look at that. Boy, it really clears up some of that cloudiness in the middle. Very nice. I think I like that. I like that. I'm going to take it. I'll click the Apply to Serial button. And there we go. We can close that. And we are now done with that tool. One of the final little touches we can apply to this is the Verilux Vectra tool. It's not always needed. In my experience with my data, I've noticed that the hypermetric stretch does a great job of applying proper color to the image. Vectra just allows you to enhance those a little more. But more often than not, the result you get from the hypermetric stretch doesn't really require much adjustment. If anything, sometimes it requires a little bit of desaturation. But let's just demonstrate what this tool can do. It's simply a way of playing around with the primary colors and also secondary colors. You can enhance the saturation, and you can also change the hue. So since I have no idea what this is actually supposed to look like in real life, the only thing I usually do with this tool is just see if any of these have any effect. Like if I run up the red, what happens? Doesn't look like a whole lot. Again, you can use spacebar to toggle back and forth. Red added a little bit out the edge, but not, maybe a little bit in here. Didn't really add a whole lot to it. Some. It added a little bit. We set that back to the default. Green, check the green out, and don't really see much change in the green. Try all the blue. Again, you don't really see much change in the image. Check out the secondary vectors. Let's look at the yellow. Yellow does add something. I like that. We'll come back and put some yellow in. Set it back to the default though. Check out the cyan. It doesn't seem to do much. And the magenta. What's that do for us? Not a whole lot. So it looks like the two main vectors that enhance this image at all are the yellow and the red. I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow. And come over, add a little bit of the red. Now you can also shift the hues too. I usually don't do that, mostly because I don't have an understanding for what colors should be shown. So mostly I'll just take the colors that are there and maybe just enhance those, and then just be happy with that. But if you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty of this little tool, you can really fine-tune what direction you're sending these colors into. But anyway, that's what the Vectra tool is. Like I said, in many cases with the images I get out of my telescopes, I find the hypermetric stretch provides most of the color that I really need. But if you want to enhance them a little bit more, the Vectra is the one you apply right before you go to save the image. Now at this point, I have stretched this image and applied some curves and other tools to it. Now it needs to be saved so I can use it again later when I create the final image. So I could save it out as the original starless file, but I like keeping a copy of that original starless file in its original unstretched condition. So what I will do instead, I'll just save this out under a different file name, which is basically just back out all that information and just leave the object name. I'll go with Starless M1, save that. Okay, I've got this image saved, and I'm done with Vectra. And now I'm ready for the next step, which is the Star Composer step. However, before I do the Star Composer, there's one more thing I will do that I did not insert into this step-by-step lineup here. Not sure why I didn't insert it, but maybe I just forgot about it. But one other thing I like to do before I combine the starless and the starry images to create the final image, is I like to have a look at the star mask. So we've worked on the starless part of the image. Now I'm going to look at the star mask that the starless tool generated. So let's open that. Again, we're looking at it in the linear format. So let's look at it in the auto stretch view. So this is our star image without the nebula object. Again, this is in the linear. This is the linear data. This data has not been stretched. So this is the linear data. The object has been stretched. This particular data has not. So I'm going to look at it in the auto stretch format. And it looks pretty good. I mean, I can go ahead and just use this to combine with my image, and in fact I will. But sometimes the starless, or the starry image, the image without the object, sometimes it may come out really extra noisy, or maybe sometimes you have some stars that are just way too bright because they're very bright stars. But there are cases that can occur where you might want to edit this image first before you combine it. And you get a nice little tool to do that with here in Cyril. And I'll demonstrate that now. So I'm going to go to star processing, and first I'll just click desaturate. So if any of these stars were oversaturated and clipped, it'll fix that. In fact, it'll tell us. Let me see if I turn this off. It tells us that it found one star and desaturated it. So that's where that comes into handy. But then, so once you've done that, then the next step would be to go to star processing and click the dynamic PSF dialog here on the synthesis tool. Again, through experimentation, I found that I like the setting of 0.15 in this box. And once I've done that, made that change, I will click this button here. And this will detect and highlight most of the stars in the image. The most dim ones it will not highlight, as you can see here. So what we can now do, now that all these stars have been found and selected, is simply come over here and click full resynthesis, and you'll see what happens when you do that. Notice how that noisy background has all been changed to a flat black. So you now have a background that's flat black and just your stars. All these selected stars have all been reconstructed based on your data, based on the data that's in this image. These stars have been reconstructed based on the data that is available in this image to appear as they should appear. This is called star resynthesis. I will sometimes use it in my final images, and sometimes I don't. I like to go ahead and create it at this point so that it is available if I want to use it. So now that I've created this image, I will save it. I'm going to save it, and again, I don't want to overwrite the original star mask. I do want to keep that. So I'm going to save this out under a new file name, star mask M1, and save that. Now I am ready to use the Star Composer tool. Let's go to it. I'm going to load the original star mask, not the edited one that I made. And then I will load my starless image that I did make, which is this one. And now for the next step, make sure my sensor is correct. I need to change it to be the Seestar S50. And we will now bring the stars in. I love this tool. Here we go. Okay. So I could drag this across here, but I kind of know through experience that a good starting point is probably about there. Boom. All right. Look at there. Now we got the stars and the nebula all on one image. Now with this tool, we can drag this back and forth to either increase the the number of stars and the star brightness, or we can drag it back the other way and decrease the number of stars and the star brightness. And this is done, literally, this is done to taste. Again, another part of the artistry of astrophotography. How many stars do you want? How bright do you want them to be? Some people like lots of stars and have a lot of very bright stars. Other people like to have very few stars. So And again, personal preference. I kind of fall down in the middle and like to have a lot of stars, but not too many. And this looks to me, to my eyes, I like that. That looks good. If you're happy with your combined images, click Process. Now I am set up for auto stretch, so I need to now change this back to linear. Now we are looking at the linear view, the new linear view of our actual image. This now contains the unstretched star background along with the stretched nebula. Okay, looks pretty good, but we can make it look better. It already looks better than the image that came out of the telescope. Let's look for comparison. Here's what we got on the telescope by default. And here's where we're at with this one. Now let's make it look even better. So, next step in the, whoops. Sorry about that, let me get this off the screen. Next step, we have completed Star Composer. Check that off the list. Cosmic Clarity Sharpen. It's a tool from the SETI Astro guy that I shouted out to earlier. All right. Again, without really explaining why I'm making settings, just know that over time and experience, this is kind of the settings that I've decided I like to use on images like this. I'm going to do sharpening on both the stellar and the non-stellar. Sharpen the stars and also sharpen the object. For this smaller nebula, I'm going to go with a non-stellar strength of 5. Kind of bring this over. And let me look at my stars up close here real quickly. Because it looks like I really don't need a whole lot of sharpening, honestly. So let's go with a light amount. Get back to where we at. Here we go. All right, so let's take it down from the default of .50. I'm going to go down to about half of that. Maybe a little less. Okay, .22. So I'm going to go with a .22 on the stellar sharpening and turn up the sharpening a bit on the object. And let's start that process. This process will take a few minutes. It takes a while to go through and look at every single star and sharpen them all. So I'll be back when this is complete. Okay, that process is completed. As you can see, there's already a stark difference. Let me close that. So let's look at the before and the after on this one. Before, after. Before, after. So the denoising is completed, and now for the final touch. This is the one that will really pop the image. The final touch is the onboard Cirrus Curves transformation tool. You scoot that over so you can see what happens here. First we'll come down here and set the black floor, drag it up close to where the data starts. Just make sure by looking at these numbers here that I'm not clipping any data, which I'm not. Notice the image it held, it's already done. That looks really good. We'll just pop it out a little bit more by what I like to do is place a dot here and here and here and come down here and just a little drag. Yeah, like that. And apply that, close this, and that is the final image. Let me get back up on the screen here. That is the final image that I will now save as the final image. Let's compare that to the image that came by default out of the telescope, which is, where's that at? It's over here. Whoops. Yeah. Here it is. There. So yeah, let's close that. quite a difference, wouldn't you say? So it took a bit of work and a bit of effort, but the nice picture you get out of the telescope can be made even nicer if you learn how to use software like this. Curves and done. Done. So I'm done processing that image. All I need to do now is save it, so let me do that. And one of the things I've also learned about Siril recently by accidentally discovering it. Up until very recently, when I was ready to save my final image, I would go right over here to click Save as a Unique File, because that will save the image out as a PNG file. Let me show you. It saves the image out as a PNG file. It's a very nice file format, beautiful to use for just about anything. And I would just save that as my final image and go on about my happy way. What I did not know was when you do that, using this Save as Unique File tool to instantly save that out as a PNG, what it's doing is it's saving a screen copy of this exact screen size of the image. In other words, it's not saving the full resolution of the actual image itself. I don't know why. Fucking video froze. So, in most cases, you really want to save this out as the actual full-size image, not just the screen size. So what I now do instead is I'll go to this save, where I would normally go to save a fit file. I will now go over here and change the supported image files to PNG and save it over here. That'll save it in the true resolution of the image. So I like to use the original stack file name as a guide to name this. Let me paste that in here. And what I'll do is I'll just back this up to the date that's in the file name. And in all caps, I will add final. And save that out as a PNG. I like to save them as PNGs because I can always convert it to a JPEG later if I need to, but I like to have the PNG version of the file to get the best resolution possible. But anyway, that's one of the things that I'll do to save the final image. The other thing that I will do is add annotation. And the annotation information is provided by the astrometry, the plate solving that's done. But what that allows you to do is to come down to this tool here and click that button. And based on which catalogs you have selected, it'll identify things on the image and show them and give you a little graphic. Now, if you try to save this under, there's another weird tick about Siril. If I go to here and try to save this out as a PNG image, it will save the PNG image, but it will not include the annotation. The only way I can get it to include the annotation is if I come over here to save the screen copy of the image. Save as unique file. Now that will save out with the annotation applied. So, a little weird quirk in Siril, but anyway, once all is said and done, what I end up with is this is all the files that have been generated by the processing of my lights frames. We get the stack, the final stack file, and I got a couple of different Starless files that I could play with in the future. I can come back into the future and maybe play with this data some more and see if there's other ways I can make it look better. It's good to save all this original data. We also get one of the outputs from the Star Composer tool, and then we get the files I have saved, which is that file I don't need. We'll get rid of that one, but this is the actual final file that's in the actual final resolution. 90%. Here's the 100% view of it. Very nice. I like it. Look how colorful the stars are. It's a great image. And then here's the annotated copy. So the very final thing that I will do is take the output files that were generated and move them, copy them back over to the M1 folder on my E drive. Let me change. I like to change this view to details. There we go. I'll come back to my working directory and I'll delete everything except the presets folder. So now my working directory is prepared to do the analysis or do the processing on the next object that I want to process. So let me get back to a bigger view of me here and wrap this all up by saying that I tried to present a kind of a walkthrough or a typical view of what you can go through when you want to process smart telescope files yourself, as opposed to just taking the automatic output that comes from the telescope. The automatic output's nice, but you can take the data the telescope captured for you and you can process it yourself and make it look much better. Yes, it takes a little time and effort, but it's well worth it, in my opinion. So I've got a few slideshows of all the astrophotography observations I've done over the past couple of months. They're on my channel. You can watch them anytime you want. And I'll make more. I've got a couple more I'm going to make, including the ones from this observation from last night. I just need to go process all the rest of the data now, which will take some time. As a point of comparison for last night, I think I captured, I captured how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Captured 10 objects last night. It'll take me all of the rest of the day today to process the rest of this data, all the way up until this evening before I'm done getting it processed. So anyway, but is it worth the time? Yes, it is. Yes, it is, in my opinion. But that's it. That's all I have for now. It's probably way more than enough. But hopefully that gave you a inside view of the work that goes on to create the images that I do create once the telescope is done capturing them. Anyway, hope someone found that useful. And if you're thinking about buying one of these telescopes, even though I pointed out a lot of negatives to them, don't let that discourage you. Definitely buy one of these things. They're really cool. I really like mine, and in fact, I'm already looking forward to getting the next more powerful one, if there's one available and if I can afford it. But yeah, I'm already looking to add to the fleet. Really love this hobby. Anyway, that's it. Ta-la.